Headliner Nation, down here. On the running back episode, Jake said he was worried about conspiracy theories in the NFL after week 9. So, just to be safe, throwing on the tinfoil hat. NFL can't read our minds. We're going to stay safe right here in the studio. Throw your tinfoil hat on as well. Let's talk about tight ends. What's up, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. And no, there's no conspiracies going on in the NFL. However, it's hard not to make fun of it and laugh a little bit when we look at weeks like week 9 and see the way some of the outcomes were. Jake mentioned it in his running back videos. Guys like J.D. McKissic were outscoring Ezekiel Elliott and other top backs. It's hard to imagine how that plays out sometimes. However, that just means we need to dig deeper. We need to find those value plays, and we have to establish the guys during the week that will give us the best return come game day on Sundays. Now, with that being said, full transparency is always here on the Fantasy Headliners. Let's take a look at what we missed and what we got right in week 9. Now, I will tell you the number isn't great. However, we're going to do a little bit of a reverse order. Let's look at where we stand in our rankings right now. Over on Fantasy Pros, right now with our rankings, still number 1 overall for tight ends. That's what matters, folks. Even on the hits, even with our hits and misses on the start and sit videos, the rankings are what matter. So you come to this video, you take in a lot of the knowledge, hear what we have with some feedback for the players, and then you go to the rankings videos later in the week, and that's where we establish where we have guys finishing for the week. So to be number 1 overall out of 153 certified rankers on Fantasy Pros, super, super excited about that. Got to keep going, though. Okay, got to keep going, especially after a week like last week. And like I said, it wasn't great. So looking at those numbers, yep, last week was down only 56%. Not proud of that at all, but we're going to get better. We're going to have a much better week here this week. I like some of these matchups for tight ends. We're going to jump into who I think is going to have the best opportunities for you. Let's talk about who we're going to start and who we're going to sit for the tight end position in week 10. Typically in past seasons for Thursday Night Football, we've talked about how much we hate the matchups, and then we get to Thursday Night Football and we watch the game and we're just like, man, can we just play football on Sundays? However, this year's been a little bit different. This year has come with some better matchups on Thursday Night Football, and this week will probably be no exception, especially for the tight end position. Love myself some Hunter Henry again this week. More than likely, when my rankings are all said and done, they won't end up including the Thursday night players because the rankings don't come out until after Thursday night. However, my overall rankings for the week, more than likely, Hunter Henry will be at the very top of the week. So let's talk about these guys. Hunter Henry's a start this week. Oakland's allowing 18 fantasy points per game to tight ends. It's 5th most in the NFL. And on a per game basis right now, Hunter Henry, 7.6 targets per game, 5.8 receptions per game, 77.6 yards per game. He just has to find the end zone more often. If he can get into the end zone more often this season, he is going to finish more up towards the top 5 tight ends, and that's even going to be with him missing some games at the start of the season. So he's definitely performing well when he's on the field. I know a couple of weeks ago wasn't great. However, a majority of the games he's played this year so far, he's been excellent, and you continue to start him on a weekly basis. Now with Darren Waller, I'm going to admit, I'm a bit nervous about Darren Waller this week. I'm going to put him as a start. He's one of my favorite options at the tight end position. He was coming into the season. If you've been a part of Headliner Nation, you know that. We talked about him a lot this offseason, put him in the draft guide, everything like that. However, only 4 receptions the last 2 weeks, and last week he had a season low 2 targets. Foster Moreau has played 57% of the snaps last week. So he's starting to see a little bit more and more each week. Yes, they're running some 2 tight end sets because Waller's still seeing like 70-something% of the snaps. However, also the Chargers have been pretty good against defending the tight end this year. Chargers are only allowing 9.56 fantasy points per game, the 9th fewest. Now, the tight end position is so shallow, you have to start Darren Waller. Unless you have a Hunter Henry, a George Kittle, a Travis Kelce, someone where you absolutely know that they could get the volume, they could get the snaps, they could get everything that you would need to be a good tight end for the week. Unless you have somebody like that, you have to start Darren Waller. Just keep in mind this week, we could end up seeing a little bit lower of a ceiling for him. However, the volume should still be there, so we're still going to put him in our lineup regardless. Well, last week, TJ Hawkinson finally showed up since week 1, which is hard to believe. I mean, after that performance in week 1, everybody was jumping on the TJ Hawkinson bandwagon. However, since then, it has not been good. Last week, though, the most targets and the most yards he's had since week 1. So a little bit better of a performance. He was a start for us here on the channel last week. I thought he was going to have a little bit better game than he did. However, I'm going to go ahead and throw him back into the start column this week. The Bears are allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to tight end, and there's possibly going to be a lot of Hawkinson this week, some decent volume, because the Bears allow the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receiver. So if they can limit the wide receivers in this pass game, it's going to be Hawkinson who's going to have to step up this week. That's why I'm going to go ahead and list him as a start, because he could be one of the guys that actually has a decent shot at putting up some numbers. Now on the other side of the ball, Trey Burton, Adam Shaheen, neither of these guys, again, we're considering as a start this week. They've basically been splitting snaps every single week. They only have a combined 36 targets and 23 receptions on the year, and neither one has found the end zone yet this year either. So neither of them are guys that I am considering. Hawkinson is the only one that I would consider starting in this matchup. I'm going to be honest with you all. I sat and looked at this matchup longer than any other matchup this week, which when you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, you say, hey, Mark Andrews against Cincinnati, not a good team. Yeah, absolutely. We're starting him. However, that's not going to be the case this week. Now, let's talk about Andrews a little bit first. This is why I'm concerned. Number one, Cincinnati has actually done a pretty good job against tight ends this season. Now, they really haven't faced a whole lot at the tight end position this season. They've had a couple of good games against some decent tight ends, but the last time the Baltimore Ravens faced the Cincinnati Bengals, Andrews did have 99 yards. But the one thing about this matchup, and we'll talk about this more on the quarterback video, and Jake has talked about Mark Ingram a lot this week, the Bengals are starting a rookie quarterback this week, a guy who has no previous experience in the NFL, hasn't played a snap yet this season, and he's going to be starting this week against a defense that played very well against Tom Brady last week. So this is not a game that I'm expecting to even be close, to be completely honest with you, and I think we're going to see a ton of Mark Ingram this week. If this is a game that gets out of hand, Andrews might not see the necessary volume to return any kind of value. And honestly, I almost put him as a sit. He's more than likely going to be a very low tight end one for me this week. Yes, absolutely. At the beginning of the game, he could get himself a touchdown. He could see 3, 4, 5 catches at the beginning of the game to get things rolling. But from there on out, if the Ravens play well against the Bengals, we might not see much of Andrews the rest of the day. So, are we starting Andrews? More than likely. However, this is definitely going to be a matchup that you're going to need to check back on my rankings for. If you own Mark Andrews, there is a good chance that there's going to be several guys that I'm going to say go with them over Andrews this week. We'll dive into it a little bit more in the rankings video. However, I am extremely worried about him. Jumping over to Tyler Eifert and CJ Who's Your Mama. Neither of these guys I'm considering this week. Yes, we could look at it and say, oh, rookie tight end. Kind of the same thing that we saw with Brandon Allen and Noah Fant last week. Noah Fant last week having that breakout performance that a lot of people have been waiting on. Maybe was it because of the rookie quarterback? Was a rookie quarterback focusing on his tight end? Yeah, maybe the same thing could end up happening here. However, I just don't expect this to be a very good game. The offensive line hasn't been very good this season. It doesn't sound like A.J. Green's going to be there. The wide receivers haven't performed as expected other than John Ross before he got hurt. Alex Erickson has played pretty good. I included him on the waiver wire video, and Joe Mixon hasn't been very good either. I expect this to be a very sloppy game for the Bengals. I'm not expecting a whole lot, and because of that, I'm not going to trust my team with either Eifert or Who's Your Mama this week. Not a whole lot to see in this matchup other than a whole lot of sits there on the right-hand side of the screen, and I will tell you for the Buffalo Bills, I am expecting either Knox or Croft to have a decent game. One of these guys could absolutely be a start by the end of the week. However, I am going to stay away from them this week. I'm not loving the matchup. I'm not loving that we've seen them go a little bit back and forth. Not loving that they could be splitting a lot of snaps. I just don't know who to trust. I don't know who to trust. And at this point of the season, if you're a team that's on the outside of the playoffs looking in and you need some reliable players, you have to get wins. Knox and Croft are not going to be the reliable starters. Yes, we could look back at the end of the week and say, man, Kyle, you missed on that one. I would not be surprised at all, but I'm going to list them both as sits because I don't trust either of them. And with the Cleveland Browns, they've basically got 3 tight ends right now splitting snaps. So neither of those guys or any 3 of those guys don't offer me any type of upside this week. So Knox and Croft sit for the Bills. Seals, Jones, Harris, Carlson, all 3 of them are going to be sits for the Browns this week. Well, every week is a Travis Kelce week. The guy is a must start, a perma start. You're never going to have him out of your lineup. However, for the other guy in this matchup, the other tight end, Jonnu Smith, he's a guy that we are going to go ahead and start this week. Had him as a start 2 weeks ago, a sit last week, back to a start this week. Didn't have a great game last week, however. I'm expecting a little bit more against Kansas City in week 10. The Kansas City Chiefs are allowing 13 fantasy points per game to tight ends. Not bad, right? Especially when tight ends are really the best tight ends. There's only several of them that are averaging double-digit tight end or double-digit points per game this year. With Jonnu Smith, I think we could definitely get there this week, up towards that 13 area. He's averaging 14.3 yards per reception, so he's actually been a big play receiver. Big play tight end, big play receiver for the Titans so far, especially with Ryan Tannehill under center. And mostly because of the fact that the wide receivers for Tennessee have just been super inconsistent. So every wide receiver, yes, A.J. Brown has had some huge weeks. Yes, Corey Davis had one huge week. We were expecting another huge week. He really let us down. Derrick Henry's been good in the running game, but we haven't seen a whole lot of Deion Lewis either. So Smith is the one consistent weapon that we've seen so far, or could be the one consistent weapon we've seen so far. We got to keep an eye on Delaney Walker, if and when he will be back. For right now, though, it is Smith. We're going to run with him. If you have him, he will be in your lineup. Austin Hooper leads all tight ends in fantasy points per game with 14.6, 2 points more than the next closest player, Darren Waller. So this is a guy you continue to start him every single week. It does not matter. Dude has been on fire, the tight end one as of right now. With Jared Cook, he is expected to be back. He's practicing, no limitations on his practice, so definitely expect him to be in the lineup this week. However, because it is his first game back from injury and we don't really know what to expect, making sure he's 100% healthy, probably not going to start him this week. Now, here's the thing, too. The 2 games before he got hurt, he was looking much better. He scored 2 touchdowns right before he got hurt. However, that was with Teddy Bridgewater. That was not with Drew Brees. Drew Brees and Jared Cook, they weren't doing anything at the beginning of the season. So with that being said, could they end up getting on the same page at some point in time? Yes, but they need to get back into a rhythm. They need to play a little bit more. And not only that, but Atlanta's giving up a ton of points to wide receivers this year, so expect a ton of Michael Thomas. Maybe we'll sprinkle in a little bit extra as well. But for Jared Cook, I'm not going to worry about him this week. Let's find some better options and some players with potentially more upside. For the matchup in the Meadowlands, there are a couple of options at tight end. However, they're only going to be from the New York Jets, which might surprise some of you. Let's talk about those options first. It's going to depend on whether or not Chris Herndon plays. Now, I'm going to say this about Ryan Griffin, okay? I had no expectations for him. I put him as a start one time this year, and he did not come through. The dude, up until 2 weeks ago, was averaging under 2 fantasy points per game in half PPR leagues, okay? He was doing absolutely nothing. And then all of a sudden, over the last 2 weeks, 116 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. What's going on? I don't know if this is a focused part of the game plan to get him more involved. However, this week, against the New York Giants, I'll run with one of them. Yeah, this might end up being a mistake. Chris Herndon is the preferred target here, though. If he's healthy and he plays this week, that's who we want to see play. If he is healthy and he is ready to go and he is listed as the starter, I'll go with Herndon this week. If not, it is possible Ryan Griffin could end up being a guy that we do stream. Don't love it. Not really putting a ton of expectations other than he gets maybe towards that low tight end 1 area. He could definitely find the end zone, however, and this is a matchup he could definitely find it in. Now for the Giants, for Evan Ingram, he's dealing with a foot injury. I'm going to go ahead and skip on him this week. I do not want to take a chance that I put Evan Ingram in my lineup and he gets a couple plays in and says, man, I can't do it. My foot's too sore. And then all of a sudden you've got a 0 at tight end. Again, if we are fighting for a playoff spot, you cannot take those risks right now. Okay? For Rhett Ellison, though, I'm still not going to start him either. He hasn't been a fantasy viable option this year. He did score 1 touchdown. It did make him a start 1 time this season. I'm not going to put my faith in him, though. Even if Evan Ingram were to be ruled out before Sunday, Ellison is not the guy that I'm going to pivot to. When Arizona allows the most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, you start the tight end playing against them, even if it's O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard is going to be a start for me this week. It looks like he is ready to go. And the good thing here is that, well, not good. I don't want to say it's good, but Cameron Brate is dealing with a rib injury right now. There's a good chance he won't suit up this week. And even if he does, he's going to be extremely limited, which means even more snaps for O.J. Howard. So that's what we need. We need O.J. Howard on the field. And with Tampa Bay, yes, they probably won't give up a ton on the ground, but they can still give up a lot through the air. If this is a game that can stay close, O.J. Howard definitely has a lot of touchdown upside this week. Now, basically in my rankings this year, if you play Arizona, you're a top 1 or 2 tight end for that week. I'm not going to go that high with O.J. Howard. However, I will probably put him in that mid tight end 1 area and half PPR leagues. If he can't get it done against Arizona this week, he's not going to get it done at all this season. This is the matchup that you've been waiting for. This is the reason that maybe you've held on to O.J. Howard, you had him on your IR, whatever it may be, or you pick him up this week if he's available in your league and you play him, because this is the matchup where he could go off and have a huge game. I didn't include him in the waiver wire episode, and some of you asked about Mike Gesicki for this year. I needed to dive into it a little bit more. Gesicki has not been good this year, and really since he was drafted, he hasn't been all that good either. However, he might be starting to turn the corner a little bit. Since their bye, it looks like he's been a little bit more included in the game plan every single week. And if there's a guy that's going to get him the football, it could end up being Ryan Fitzpatrick. So if Ryan Fitzpatrick is starting, maybe we need to start giving Mike Gesicki a little bit more of a look. He's facing the Colts this week, 7th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Gesicki's coming off a 95-yard performance last week, and he's averaged 5 targets per game since the bye. So this could be a streaming option. This could be a guy that if he's still available on your waiver wire right now and you need somebody, this could be it. Now, he is very boom or bust. Yes, he has a decent ceiling this week, but Mike Gesicki's floor is in the basement every single week. The guy could put up 0 points at any point in time, okay? That's why he's very volatile. So we have to be careful with how we are starting him. If you're in a matchup where you're projected to be down by a ton, maybe Gesicki is a guy that you go for. If you're in a matchup where you're projected to be really, really close, maybe you look for somebody that's a little bit safer. So for Gesicki this week, definitely a guy that I'm keeping an eye on. I will list him as a start because I think he could get up towards those top 12 tight ends this week with a decent performance. Now for Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle. Here's the thing. On this channel, we love ourselves some Jack Mother Doyle, okay? We absolutely do. Eric Ebron, we were kind of cool on him coming into the year. He had to regress some, and it ended up happening. But one of these guys is going to eat this week. I don't know which one it is, especially if T.Y. Hilton is out. So we got to keep an eye on that. No word for sure if he will be out this week at the time of this recording. That could definitely change by the time we drop the episode. However, one of these guys is gonna have a good week. I don't know which one it is, to be quite honest with you. My money kind of lies on being Jack Doyle if it is Brian Hoyer playing. If Hoyer's playing, I'm leaning towards Doyle a little bit. If it's Brissett playing, I might lean back towards Ebron. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this one. This is one that we'll definitely talk more about on our live show. Again, you got to keep an eye out for that rankings video. I'm going to list them both as a start, though, right now, because either of them will end up being a start this week. In battle of the old guy tight ends, Greg Olsen is going to be the only guy that I start this week. Jimmy Graham is just too volatile. He's up and down. Yeah, he might get 50 yards and a touchdown in one game, and then he might have 2 receptions for 12 yards in the next. He just hasn't been good this year. Yes, he's had a couple of good games, but he's not someone that I want to rely on this week, especially against the Carolina Panthers, who've done a pretty good job of limiting tight ends this season. For Greg Olsen, though, he gets the Green Bay Packers, who are giving up the 8th most fantasy points per game this week. Fantasy points per game to tight ends. He gets them this week. And with that being said, I think there's going to be some decent volume with Greg Olsen this week. If he gets into the end zone, that's just the cherry on top of the sundae. I think he has a decent week. Definitely a low-end tight end one for me as of right now, but I'll list him as a start because I definitely think he's going to be in that area. Two guys to possibly start in this matchup, Gerald Everett and Vance McDonald. Vance McDonald's very touchdown dependent for me. However, the Rams are giving up just over 13 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. So with Mason Rudolph being back, I definitely like that. Plus, we're obviously going to see with Jalen Ramsey on the other side, we're going to see a little bit of a limited production from Juju Smith-Schuster, which has basically been that way all season long. However, definitely not seeing him this week. So who's going to step up? I think Vance McDonald could end up being a guy to step up this week. I like it. I like the matchup. I like him as a touchdown-dependent streaming option. With Gerald Everett, no Brandon Cooks this week, so Everett could be the guy. Now, I saw a lot of you asking about Josh Reynolds because the Los Angeles Rams, in the past when they've been missing a wide receiver, run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. Reynolds typically gets in. However, they've never had a tight end perform this well in the past either, and Everett's been pretty good this season at times. So I think even if they do that without Cooks, I think we see some of that volume flow down to Everett instead of going over to Reynolds, which a lot of people have been asking about. So Everett will be a start for me this week because of the fact he could definitely see some more looks than he has in weeks past. Jason Witten, coming off an 8-reception performance against the New York Giants, is going to be a start for me again this week. He's a guy, he's inside the top 12 at tight ends now. I did not see that coming prior to the season, especially coming out of retirement, but he's been very good. He is 3rd on the team in targets right now, and he's actually 1st in catch percentage. 85% of the balls coming his way are being caught, so that's excellent for Jason Witten. He's become a very reliable target for Dak Prescott. Could definitely see him being a start this week. Blake Jarwin, though, yes, he had the one big play last week, but that's really all that he had. It was just the one big play. So I'm not going to jump to conclusions and say, oh man, big play, big week next week. Not in this matchup, especially with Jason Witten still playing so well. Witten is getting the volume. Jarwin is more of a touchdown-dependent play, hoping you get that one big play per game. Now with Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr., yes, again, we got teased a little bit a couple of weeks ago. We thought they might be getting a little bit more involved in the passing game with Adam Thielen being out. It could end up happening again this week. Absolutely. But who's it going to be? Again, this is one of those things like with Dawson Knox and Tyler Kroft. I don't know what's going to happen with these two. But neither of them had done anything this year. Nothing. They had the one good game where they both were inside the top 12 tight ends when Adam Thielen went out at the beginning of the game. But what are we going to get? Is it going to be one touchdown and maybe a couple of receptions? Will it be Smith? Will it be Rudolph? One of them could definitely end up being a start. And we're going to keep an eye on that within my rankings as well. However, I've already listed a whole lot of starts this week because I like several matchups. This one is a decent matchup because the Cowboys have been giving up some big-time plays to tight ends. I just can't trust it. I cannot trust these tight ends in this matchup. One of them could very well end up turning out to be a start, but for my lineups, neither of them are going to come close. I didn't include Hollister on the waiver wire episode because of this matchup. So when on the waiver wire episode, we have so many teams on buys this week. I was really looking at guys that could help this week, and Hollister is not one of those guys. Coming off a really big game last week, we know that Will Dissly was very involved in the passing game. When is Josh Gordon going to get in and get rolling, though? When's that going to happen? Tyler Lockett obviously cemented wide receiver 1. DK Metcalf has been huge this season. So with Hollister in this matchup against the San Francisco 49ers team that's been awesome, no, we're not going to go with it this week. Go ahead and leave him on your bench or waiver wire. George Kittle, though, obviously, again, a perma start. You are playing him no matter what. There you have it, Headliner Nation, wrapping up our tight end start and sit episode for Week 10 of the NFL season. Don't forget, make sure that you hit that like button, comment, subscribe to the channel. Also, though, if you're willing, go down below to our Patreon link. $1 a month. You can help support the channel. We got a lot of cool things coming. We're getting the Patreon account revamped. We're going to talk about it revamped. We're going to talk about it more on the live show this week. So keep that in mind as well. If you're looking for a way to help support and you're willing and you love the content, that's a way that you could help out. But for now, we're going to sign it off. We're going to go work on our quarterback video right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Have a good one. We'll catch you on the next episode.